The movie revolves around Tim Lake and his family, residing in Cornwall, England. Tim shares a home with his affectionate mother, his father James, who is a former professor, his uncle Desmond, who is battling Alzheimer's, and his free-spirited sister Catherine. At the beginning of the movie, Tim and his father have a meeting in their family's den, where James reveals a significant ancestral secret that was passed down to him by his own father when he reached the age of 21. Allegedly, the male members of their family possess the remarkable ability to traverse time, much to Tim's astonishment. He's skeptical, so he asks his father to prove the claim. James then reveals that in order to do so, he must go to a dimly lit space, shut his eyes, clasp his hands tightly, and concentrate on the precise moment he desires to visit, assuring Tim that he will find himself there. However, there are limits to this, and he can only go to moments in his own life. Tim then goes into the wardrobe to try this out. When he does what James told him, he suddenly realizes that he's been transported to his family's recent New Year's celebration. The sight of himself adorned in the very attire worn during the party leaves him in a state of astonishment. Suddenly, the countdown to midnight happens, and he grabs a blonde woman and kisses her. Subsequently, Tim returns to the present moment, eager to share his bewildering experience with his father. Tim candidly tells him that he wants to use this power to find himself a girlfriend. The movie then fast forward to summer, and Catherine's friend Charlotte arrives to stay with Tim's family. Tim is instantly smitten by her, and he tries to impress her. Inevitably, he messes up, but he uses his powers to fix his mistakes. On the last day of Catherine's stay, he goes to Catherine's room to ask her out, but she tells him that he shouldn't have waited till her last night to make a move. Tim then quickly goes to the closet and goes back in time to make a move. Charlotte is more interested, but then says they should wait until her last night to see how she feels, much to her disappointment. It eventually dawns on Tim that no matter how much he travels back in time, he cannot make Charlotte fall in love with him. After the summer concludes, Tim relocates to London to pursue a legal career. There, he moves in with a family friend, Harry. Tim commences his work at a law firm and befriends Rory, a young man who becomes a constant presence in his quest for a girlfriend. One evening, Jay introduces Tim to a unique dining experience at a restaurant where they're paired with a blind dates in a dark room. Tim engages in engaging conversation with an American girl named Mary, while Jay spends time with her friend Joanna. Tim and Mary connect exceptionally well, while Joanna exhibits minimal interest in Jay. The group then reunites outside, and Tim finds himself captivated by Mary's beauty despite her modest self-perception. Tim compliments her dress and fringe hairstyle, and before Mary and Joanna depart, he successfully obtains Mary's phone number. Upon returning home, Tim discovers his roommate Harry upset over a disastrous performance of his play, where one of the actors suffered from a severe case of stage fright and forgot their lines. Therefore, he decides to change Harry's mood by resetting the evening using his power. Tim locates the dressing room of one of the principal actors, who happens to be in his final on-screen appearance, and encourages him to review the script once again. Initially met with rudeness, Tim's persistence persuades the actor to give the script another read-through. Tim and Harry then witness the play, and the actor flawlessly delivers their lines, earning applause from the audience. Unfortunately, another actor freezes on stage, prompting Tim to travel back in time and intervene backstage by providing cue cards. This enables the actor to recite their lines perfectly, resulting in a well-deserved round of applause. Following the performance, Tim attempts to contact Mary, but discovers that her number is not saved in his phone. Frantically, he hurries to the restaurant, but is informed by the host that Mary and Joanna have already departed. The host is unable to provide him further details as they paid in cash, leaving Tim with no additional information. The following day, Tim notices an advertisement of Kate Moss in a newspaper, and he remembers talking to Mary about the actress. Tim decides to visit a museum hosting an exhibit showcasing pictures of Kate Moss, hoping to find Mary there. Days pass by without any success until Mary happens to walk by. Tim approaches her and they reintroduce themselves and engage in conversation, sharing updates about their respective lives. However, Tim learns that Mary is now in a relationship with a man named Rupert. Curious about the circumstances surrounding their initial meeting, Tim inquires about the details. Upon discovering that Mary met Rupert at Joanna's party, he quickly excuses himself to the restroom where he travels back in time to prevent their encounter from happening. Arriving at Joanna's apartment, Tim persuades Mary to depart the party with him before Rupert arrives. They proceed to enjoy a delightful dinner together, fostering him to her home, and the two spend the night. Over time, their relationship blossoms, and Tim eventually moves in with her. He also gets to meet her parents one day when they unexpectedly arrive at her house. Initially, the situation feels somewhat awkward, but with the help of a few well-timed time travels, Tim straightens everything out. One evening, Tim goes to watch a play with Rory. There, he unexpectedly runs into Charlotte, leading to an initially awkward conversation. Undeterred, he attempts a second interaction, but it also fails to go smoothly. Tim then decides not to approach Charlotte on his third attempt and continues on his way with Rory. Surprisingly, Charlotte notices him this time and takes the initiative to initiate a conversation. The two then go for dinner, and she expresses regret for rejecting him the previous summer. As their evening progresses, she invites Tim to walk her back to her apartment, even suggesting that he join her inside. However, Tim declines, realizing that he's in love with Mary. Filled with excitement, Tim rushes back home and proposes to Mary, who joyfully accepts his marriage proposal. The following summer, Tim introduces Mary to his parents, and a strong bond begins to form between Mary and Tim's mother, while Tim enjoys quality time with his father. Tim also reconnects with Catherine, who shares her struggles in London and her recent breakup with Jimmy. During a family dinner, Tim and Mary surprise everyone by announcing Mary's pregnancy and their wedding. The scene then cuts to the wedding day, and despite a few mishaps, the ceremony is filled with romance and laughter. However, a major issue arises when Tim realizes that he's chosen Rory as his best man, who delivers a disastrous speech. In an attempt to rectify the situation, Tim travels back in time to ask Jay to be the best man instead, but his efforts prove unsuccessful. Similarly, when he turns to Harry for help, the outcome remains unsatisfactory. Ultimately, Tim seeks his father's assistance, and he manages to craft a heartfelt speech befitting the momentous occasion. Some months later, Mary gives birth to a baby girl named Posey. Tim also moves his family into a bigger house which can accommodate their growing family. Tim also starts to love every moment and almost stops using time travel. The movie then fast forwards to Posey's first birthday. Everyone arrives for the party except Catherine. However, some moments later, Jimmy arrives and informs everyone that Catherine was driving drunk after an argument with him, and as a result, she met with an accident. She is badly injured, so in order to save her, Tim uses his power to go back in time and picks Catherine from her home for the party. However, he soon realizes that Catherine's problems are far from solved, and he begins to interfere in her life. One day, he comes clean to her about his powers and takes her back to the New Year's party where she met Jimmy. Once there, when Jimmy approaches her, she punches him, much to his bewilderment. Catherine and Tim then return back to the present, and the former realizes her feelings for Jay, and the two decide to go out on a date. Meanwhile, when Tim returns home, he realizes that Posey, his daughter, has never been born, and instead, he has a son. Overwhelmed by this realization, Tim immediately retreats to a closet and travels back in time to the precise day when his son was born in order to have a conversation with his father, James. In their discussion, James reveals a crucial rule. Events prior to the birth of their children cannot be altered without jeopardizing the conception of that specific child. Tim comprehends that if he wishes to preserve Posey's existence, he must refrain from changing anything that occurred before her birth. Consequently, Tim accepts the impossibility of altering his sister's life by revisiting the past and preventing the accident that led to her injury in order to ensure Posey's birth. Meanwhile, Catherine remains in the hospital, and Tim and Mary stand by her side. During this time, Catherine realizes that she can only change her life, and she decides to quit drinking. As she recovers, Mary advises her to date someone who treats her right, and Tim suggests she consider dating Jay. Tim finally starts to focus on his own life, and he suggests having another child to his wife. Although she is initially reluctant to the idea, they eventually decide to have a baby. 2 years pass by, and Tim now has a boy and a girl. Everything is going well when one day, Tim gets a call from his mother, who informs him about James's terminal cancer diagnosis. Tim, Mary, and Catherine quickly rush to the beach house, and Tim comes to the realization that time travel cannot reverse his father's cancer. He also understands that going back far enough to alter this outcome would jeopardize the birth of both himself and Catherine, a sacrifice he is unwilling to make. In the final weeks of James' life, he imparts a profound lesson to Jimmy. He advises him to relish certain moments, recognizing the beauty and sweetness of the world. Tim follows this guidance and discovers happiness in his own life. However, there are certain days that are meant to be experienced only once, such as the day his father passed away. Unable to cope with his loss, Tim uses time travel to visit his father whenever he longs for his presence. One day, Mary expresses her desire for a third child, and Tim is initially hesitant since it means he won't be able to visit his father anymore. However, after careful consideration, he ultimately accepts because he realizes that nothing brings him greater joy than being a father with the love of his life. As the arrival of their youngest child approaches, Tim makes one final journey back in time to inform his father that he won't be able to visit him anymore. Together, they travel back to relive a cherished memory from Tim's early childhood for one last time. Mary then gives birth to a baby girl, and Tim finally comes to terms with the loss of his father. He embraces life's moments and finds happiness in the present, while Catherine gradually recovers and welcomes her child with Jay. The movie concludes with Tim discovering the secret to his own happiness, living each day without time travel, savoring life with his family as if experiencing it for the second time.